Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing some cards I made using Pink & Main's March 2020 subscription box. The theme for the month is celebrations, and it includes a full 6x6 paper pad full of beautiful colors. My pictures don't even do it justice at all. This is such a lovely collection. I will provide links in the description box if you are interested in subscribing to this kit. So let's go ahead and get started with my first set of cards, and I'm going to use something a little different. This is by Mojo Monday. This is a 2-sheet wonder challenge using 2 sheets of 6x6 paper, although the measurements are actually for 2 sheets of 6 by 6.5 inch double-sided pattern paper, but you can easily just adjust the measurements if you're using 6x6 paper. I've already gone ahead and cut up 2 of the papers. So my directions aren't printed out to scale, but I'm just showing you how I did the cuts. I love using card sketches, and there are 3 card sketches that coordinate with this 2-sheet wonder. But I thought it would be fun to actually follow the challenge since it's been a long time since I've done a 1-sheet or 2-sheet wonder before. I'm going to start with the first sketch. This is number 533, and I'm just selecting the 3 pieces of pattern paper that I'll be needing for this sketch. Since it is double-sided paper, I just kind of flipped them over and decided which combination looked best together. So I'm using the pink polka dot paper for the background, and I'm just going to round the corners on just the bottom 2. I'll layer all of this in some pink cardstock. Now for this striped paper that's going to go across the card, this is one of the pieces where I had to adjust those measurements slightly. So I'm just going to add a little extra detail with some of the sparkle cardstock that's included in the kit. I just put about 1/4 of an inch piece on there, adhered it with some liquid glue, and I'm layering that in that same pink cardstock. I have it all attached, and then I realized I'm supposed to put that purple confetti piece down first. And since my glue wasn't quite dry on this sparkle paper, that little strip did come off. And I also ripped the paper, but no big deal, it's all going to be covered up. Now for this purple confetti paper, this is another piece there you have to adjust the measurements because it does end up to only be 2 by 3 inches, and the sketch has it listed at 2 by 3.5 inches. So I'm going to stretch that piece by cutting it in half, and then I just put it on some layered pink cardstock. And there's a big gap there, but you're not going to see this in the long run. And I actually stretched my piece even more than the 3.5 inches. I think it ended up to be about 4.25 inches in length. So before I do any other embellishments or images on this card, I'm going to put my card front onto a card base. And now I'm going to start working on the image box. So I use this scalloped die that's included in the kit, this square shape, and then I cut out a piece of white cardstock just slightly larger than the opening on this window. So that's where I'll be putting my image, and I just adhered that using some liquid adhesive. And then I did notice just a tiny area where the little scallop goes down. You could see the white cardstock. So I just used a craft knife and cut that piece away. So next I'm going to do some paper piecing. This is one of the stamps included in this kit. It's a really fun gift. I stamped it on 3 different colors of cardstock, and I didn't worry about getting a solid impression on all of the pieces. I was just focused on getting the area where I'm going to use that piece for this image. So for the yellow, I used it for the bow. I'm just doing a fussy cut, and I did speed this part up quite a bit. I do not cut out things quite this fast. So here's the purple. It's just going to have the lid of the box. So I have all 3 pieces, and then just to give it a cleaner look, I just take a black marker and run it along the outside edge of all of the pieces. So once I have all of that done, I can start assembling my little present. And I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive and adhere it right onto this square. But first I'll go ahead and stamp a sentiment, and I'm using It's Your Special Day. Just going to stamp that with some black ink, put it centered on the lower portion of the box. Then I can start assembling the present Just using some liquid adhesive, start with the main body of the box with the pink, add that yellow ribbon with the little topper, and then I'll add the bow. And this is a great image to color if you love to color. You could even do some painting on it, but I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of paper piecing instead. And with all those extra little details on the stamp, the solid cardstock was sufficient, but you could also use some of the pattern paper. So I'm going to pop up this whole square panel using some foam dimensional tape, and then I'll adhere it to my card front. And then just to finish off the card, I'm adding some small banners in the upper right hand corner. The kit includes a little banner die, and so I just cut off the very ends of it. And then I'm going to use some Nuvo glitter drops in the white blizzard color, and I'm just adding them into all of those little polka dots on the present. I love just that little extra bit of sparkle, and it ties in nicely with that thin strip of glitter paper on the card. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this same sketch. So now moving on to my next set of cards. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 534, and I'm moving on to the second part of that 2-sheet wonder challenge. So I'm using that purple confetti paper for the background, and then I have 2 different pattern papers for these 2 by 3 inch pieces. So I'm just layering all of this in some purple cardstock. And the kit does include cardstock, but I use so much cardstock for layering, I will add extra cardstock just so I have enough. This is for some extra detail on this card. I decided to use some of the ribbon that's included in the kit. So this is a purple polka dot, but I thought the polka dots were a little too busy to go with the rest of the card, so I flipped it upside down. So now I'm just going to have that solid purple color instead. And I just adhered it to my card using some score tape, and then I'll just flip the ends onto the back of the panel and hold that in place with another piece of score tape. So add some adhesive and layer it on some purple cardstock, and then I'll attach my card front onto a card base. And I am leaving just that 1/8 of an inch of the card base showing. Now I'm going to start working on the image box. So I just have some white cardstock, and I decided I'm going to do a little ink blending just to give it a little extra color. I'm using Pink & Main's Ergonomic blender brush and 2 of their inks. If you've never tried their blender brush before, this thing is amazing. I always struggle with the other brands, but this one's so easy to use. I just had pink and some purple. Thought it would tie in nicely with the other colors on the card. Stamped out the sentiment, Make a Wish. And I'm going to layer that in some purple cardstock, and I did have that piece cut a little too large, so just trim that down real quick. And then since this square piece is going over that ribbon, I'm just going to add an extra layer of cardstock on the top and bottom. That way it has a nice even feel on the card. It doesn't have that bump of the ribbon. So next I used one of the pattern papers. So I did go outside of those 2 sheets. I think it still works if I'm just using it as the image. So this sheet was a gray background, and it was covered in lots of little presents. So I'm just using 3 of them and doing a real quick fussy cut all around the edge. With that neutral gray in the background, I think it worked out really nice. It doesn't stand out too much against the purple and pink background that I made. And I'm just going to adhere those onto that box, sort of stagger them just to add some interest. And I'm just using a liquid adhesive. I had thought about popping them up, but I decided to keep this card on the flatter side. And then just finishing off the card, I used a couple of the enamel dots. Used the little hearts in purple, and then I pulled out the sequins. And I'm just going to use the pink color. It has 3 different sizes, which is really nice. I like to have all those different sizes in sequins. And then I'll just adhere those to the card using some small glue dots. I have 2 different sizes of the glue dots. One of them is the micro for those really tiny sequins. So there is my finished card, and again I did make 2, and then I realized I forgot to add 2 of the sequins to that bottom card. I know the sequins don't seem to stand out a whole lot on video, but you can see them in person because it adds just that little bit of dimension and sparkle. So now moving on to the next set of cards. This is using Mojo Monday Sketch 535, and this is the third part in that 2-sheet Wonder Challenge. And there were only 2 pieces of the pattern paper left over. So just this small 2 by 3 inch box and then this thin strip, which both of them are actually a little smaller than what the sketch measurements are, but I just easily modified it and I think it still works out just fine. So I layered all of those pieces in some of this pink cardstock. I stamped the sentiment, "There is always room for cake." And I'm just using some of the yellow cardstock included in the kit. I'll go ahead and attach my card front onto a card base. So then I can start working on the image. So I cut out a stitched circle die cut and then also the scallop circle. And then I have the candle image. So there are 7 different candles, which are really cute with all the different fun patterns. But only 6 of them fit perfectly on this size circle die cut. So I just masked out the one on the end using some washi tape, stamped it using some black ink. And I didn't get a full solid impression on some of the edges, but it's not too bad. I should have probably used my mini Misty, but for what I'm going to do, it's not really going to show later. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up this whole circle. And as it is right now, it really stands out with that really bright white, but I will be toning down some of that here shortly. But first I'm going to add a few of the sequins in the upper right hand corner. I chose 3 different colors, again just adhering them to the card using some glue dots. For this style sequin, I think it just works nicer to use the glue dots versus the liquid adhesive. So now for the candles, you could easily color these. I decided I wanted to add a little more detail, so I'm using 3 different Nuvo drops. For the flames on the candle, I'm using the Ripened Pumpkin crystal drops. And then for the candles, I have some glitter drops. The purple is the Sugar Plum color, and then the pink is the Enchanting Pink. And I'm just spreading those out fairly thin on all of the candles, and I'm just alternating the colors. So trying to get a nice solid fill of all of it so there isn't any little white gaps. And then I'll just set that aside to dry while I tie a bow using some of the teal colored ribbon. I'm just doing this freehand. I had some people ask in a previous video when I didn't show how I tied the bow, so I'm going to show this time. I just start out with the loops really large, and then I start to tighten it and shorten those loops to the size that I want, and then I just trim the tails. So once the Nuvo was all dry, I did attach that bow using a glue dot. Now that I'm finished with that 2-sheet Wonder Challenge, I'm going to move on to some individual card sketches. And if you are interested in any of the sketches, as well as that 2-sheet Wonder Challenge, I will share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is listed below in the description box. So for this card, I'm using some of this really bright plaid paper, and then I also have some blue polka dot paper for those 2 strips in the background, layering all of it with some teal cardstock. And then for that main image pattern paper, I used that same gray paper with all of the presents. This is the same sheet of paper where I fussy cut out a few of those presents on a previous card. So I used the banner die that's included in the kit, stamped out the sentiment, "My gift to you." I just used some of the yellow cardstock. And you might have noticed at the beginning of this card, there was a circle cut out of the very background layered piece. So here is what I cut out. Just a great way to save on some of that cardstock, especially if you are running low on a specific color. So for the image on this card, I'm using one of the chipboard stickers. And yes, these are stickers. They do have adhesive on the back, but I always want to make sure they're going to stay in place. So I did just add a little bit of liquid adhesive before adhering them to my card. Then I cut out a couple of small stitched circle die cuts just in some solid cardstock, added them to that upper corner, and then just finished off the card with some enamel dots. So for the second card, I used some candles for that chipboard sticker instead of the party hat. So now moving on to the next set of cards, and for this card, I will not be using a card sketch. So I have some gray polka dot paper, and then I also have a strip of candles. This is one of the pattern papers. It has repeating candles, and I just cut out one row of them. And then I have some thin strips of the sparkle cardstock. When I was first designing this card, I was going to do it as a vertical card, but then I realized you weren't going to see very many of the pattern paper candles, so I decided to make it horizontal. But then I'd already cut out the sparkle paper and I didn't want to waste it. And since no one is going to see that middle section where there's a gap, I could still use those pieces rather than waste them. And so I just adhered those to the card using some liquid adhesive. So now for the image, I'm going to do some heat embossing using the cake and the cake stand. So I first treat the paper using some anti-static powder, and then I stamp it a couple of times using some Versamark ink. And then I have this beautiful purple glittery embossing powder, and this is by Love from Lizzie. So it does have quite a bit of glitter in there, so if you're going to donate it somewhere like a hospital or maybe military overseas, I would not suggest using this type of embossing powder because it does shed a little bit of that glitter. So I'm just going to heat set that. You can see that beautiful sparkle. I'm going to put it on the inside of the little scalloped frame. So I have that gray piece cut out just slightly larger than the opening, and instead of using the liquid adhesive, I'm going to use some very thin score tape. This is 1/8 of an inch. So let's peel off all of the backing, and I can go ahead and attach my square. And this time I had that square cut out perfectly. I think I ended up doing 2 7/8 of an inch, and that way none of the gray was showing through the scallop. So just add some foam dimensional tape to the back side. That way I can pop it up on the card. I was going to center that right in the middle, trying to make sure it's nice and straight. And then I realized I hadn't even placed the card front onto a card base yet. I usually try to do that before I work on the image or add any extra layers, but it still worked out just fine. I've gone ahead and stamped out the sentiment on some white cardstock, and this is "There is always room for cake." And I just cut some very small fishtails on each of the ends. Then I'm using some thin foam squares, just putting a layer on the back. I made sure to get good coverage so there isn't an area that's going to sag at all. And then I just centered that right underneath the cake stand. Then just to finish off the card, I'm adding some of the enamel dots. And I'm just using the teal color for this card. And then for the similar card I made using this same design, I used the purple enamel dots. There is the finished card. And now moving on to my next set of cards. This is a sketch from MFT. It's number 480. And this is going to be a very simple and easy card, but I still love how this turned out. I have the purple polka dot paper for the background, and then I have this really fun, colorful stripe paper for this 2-inch strip. And I just used 1/4 of an inch of the sparkle paper and just adhere that to the right hand side of this little strip. I used some score tape this time, that way I knew it was going to stick right away. The liquid adhesive holds that paper just fine, but I just wasn't very patient this time. So I'll go ahead and add my card front onto a card base. And so for this card, I'm using a large assortment of the chipboard stickers. So I have the image, the sentiment, and then also all of those little hearts. So again, these are adhesive once you pull that backing off, but just to ensure they're going to stay in place, I'm putting a little bit of liquid adhesive on the back as well. I love how the colors in the chipboard match perfectly with the pattern paper. And for those 3 circle elements on the sketch, I'm substituting those for this little rainbow assortment of the chipboard hearts. Still keeping them in the same order as the stripes. Otherwise, I felt like it would be a little off. Now for the second card, since I didn't have 3 more of those chipboard hearts, I just used some small stitched circles with some pearlescent paper. So now moving on to my final set of cards. This is a sketch from MFT. It's number 476. I used some plaid paper for the background, and I just love this plaid paper with the really wide pink stripes. And I'm using some of the blue polka dot paper for those 2 small rectangle pieces that go on the background of the card. And then I decided to round some of the corners. So the background, I used a 1/2 inch rounded corner just on the bottom 2, and then these 2 smaller pieces with that blue polka dot paper, I used the 1/4 of an inch to round the corner. I did just have to trim the one piece down slightly. I had it a little too long. I'm just layering this in some pink cardstock and then also some of that teal cardstock. The little image box is using some of the scraps that I had left over, and it was hard to decide which direction to cut that paper since the images go all different directions, so there really isn't an up or a down. But on this piece I tried to find one that had at least 2 images that were upright, so at least it didn't look upside down. I stamped the sentiment, "Wear the party hat like a crown." Used the banner die cut that's included in the kit. And then to finish off the card, I'm using some more of the sequin mix. And this is the dark blue color that's included. Just adhered all of those using some glue dots. So there is the finished card, and another fairly simple design, but I love all of these bright colors. Now here's just a quick recap of the 14 cards I made using Pink & Main's March 2020 subscription box. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but quantities are always limited since it is a monthly kit. I have included links in the description box if you are interested in subscribing to this kit. I always enjoy using Pink & Main's kits since they include a full 6x6 paper pad and lots of exclusive items like their stamp sets and dies. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.